Talk about an anniversary that's happening tomorrow. So tomorrow marks a year since 4 officers were killed during what became, one of the deadliest days in Charlotte law enforcement history. On that day, members of the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force, which included officers from multiple agencies, were serving a warrant at a home on Galway Drive over in East Charlotte when they were met with active gunfire from a suspect inside the house. 8 law enforcement officers were injured in this ambush. 3 task force officers, Deputy U.S. Marshal Thomas Weeks, North Carolina Department of Adult Correction investigators William Elliott and Samuel Pelosi, were pronounced dead at the hospital shortly after the shooting. And then CMPD officer Joshua Iyer died later that night. That's according to CMPD. This is a look from the scene of that day. And we wanted to bring in our own Kayland Hagwood, who was out there on the ground covering this story. It's hard to believe that's been a year. You just looked up and it's like, okay, we're at a year of this tragedy. What do you remember from that day? I want to ask you what do you remember, because a lot of times when we're covering these like tragic events, it's like a blur.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you remember from that day?
Well, I remember that I was on a different story.
Yeah.
I can't even remember what that story was, but it was something lighter, something, sometimes we have a little bit of a slower news day,
Mm-hmm.
and that just turned into a day that you just don't forget. We were figuring things out just like so much of the public and many of the officers as well, because this was all happening very fast and in real time. So, when we got the call that maybe something was taking place in East Charlotte, we started to travel in that direction. And then as we were traveling, we saw more and more law enforcement officers. It really was a chaotic scene. There were officers that were trying to get through and around traffic. This was around the time where I think students may have been getting ready to come home from school. So it had really locked up traffic in an otherwise very busy area. There were a lot of parents that were coming to us because at one point the traffic was at a standstill, and so we were in our big news truck, and so big news truck means information.
Right.
And people would kind of honk the horn and say, hey, do you know anything? And we truly didn't. So we were in real time trying to figure this out and figure out what was going on and try to get an understanding of what this chaos meant. And of course we do now know that it was a tragedy.
How close were you guys able to get to the scene? Because you were working with Kevin Warlaw, who's been doing this for many years as far as being in the news business. How close were you guys able to get to the scene?
Yeah, so whenever we were, it was a slow kind of a ride there, but whenever we were able to get to sort of a media staging area, and even before that area was set up, just sort of an area relatively close to the scene, we were close enough where we knew that there was a blocked road based off of the map, but you couldn't get right into that road. So later on we would determine that that was a neighborhood in which where all this took place. So we certainly could not get into the neighborhood where this was taking place, but we were on one of the main roads kind of near where that neighborhood would have been. And to kind of explain how big of a scene this had become, if you imagine a neighborhood with so many side streets within the neighborhood, that's a big area in itself. But this had really expanded out to the point where even the side streets were impacted. And if I remember right, I even think part of the interstate may have been impacted at some point during this. And so we were there. We were concerned for our safety because as we were getting that information in real time, we had learned that some officers had been shot or they were down in some capacity. I don't know if we knew the way in which they had been attacked at that point. And at that point, we didn't know, because of the scope of the large sense of the scene, we didn't know where this suspect or suspects were. We didn't know if where we were, even being on a side street away from that initial location, was a safe location or if it was also dangerous. And so as we're out there, I remember seeing another reporter from a different station who had on a bulletproof vest, just because his team had sent him out unsure what to expect. And so that was sort of the mindset of us as reporting staff as we were out there, not knowing what we were getting into. And as we were out there during that time, to give you a sense of how close things were,
Yeah.
there was I remember this big plume of smoke that had happened, and it smelled to me like it was some type of a gunpowder. I think there was, at some point, I think they did, I don't want to say it wrong, like they blew up part of the building, or they kind of dismantled part of the building. That may have been what I was smelling, but there was just this big smell of smoke that you smelled, and you didn't understand quite why that was happening, and it just added to the chaos from the parents kind of asking what's going on, and like sort of the yelling, and everyone's like, what's happening, to the standstill traffic, to this sense that at any moment there could be some dangerous person in the area. It was a lot to take in.
What was going through your mind at the time? Because like, you want to, as a journalist, we want to get the facts. We want to be brave and cover the story. But there's like a part of us that are like, we're scared. Like, we don't know what's happening. Like, we know as much information sometimes as like the people on the street. So like, what was going through your mind?
Yeah, I think that I was very nervous, wanting to just be as safe as possible. But in the moment, you also have the adrenaline running, and you want to make sure that you're able to provide the service that we provide, which is to tell people what's going on. I do feel a responsibility to that mom, or to that, random person who wants to walk up and say, hey, what's happening? Because as we talk about this being in a neighborhood, there are people who live in those houses in that neighborhood, and they were certainly turning to us, wanting to know, am I safe? Are my children safe? I think at one point people thought that, did something happen at one of the schools, because we're in that kind of environment where it could be a mass shooting of some sort. So there was a lot of confusion, and I did the best I can, our team did, to try to bring a sense of understanding and clarity.
I know that was a long day. After that day ended, what were your feelings afterwards? Like, when you got home, the next day when you got into work, like, where was your mind at that time?
I remember getting home, and for days after that, my fan was on in my living room to keep cool, and I remember it reminding me of the helicopters that were over us, and I had to cut the fan off because it was giving me such anxiety. Or for days after that, or really weeks after that, if there were multiple law enforcement officers that would be kind of going fast, getting anxiety and having a feeling like, oh, it's happening again. Because I will say, as journalists, sometimes we are aware of things that are happening before the public is aware of them happening, even without being notified that they're happening, just because we're in situations like this. And so we can tell, oh, there's something that's about to happen. Maybe we should reach out to law enforcement and learn more, as people are at home and they're comfortable and they don't have any perspective of that. So I think having that heightened sense of awareness that something could be happening was definitely something that I had to cope with.
How do you deal with those emotions? Like, how do you sort that out? How do you get through that? Or are you still working through that? Because that, I mean, again, like, that PTSD, that trauma as journalists that we get, I mean, that's real. Like, we're not machines at all. Like, we feel whenever, our community is impacted. So how did you work through that?
For me personally, and again, I don't want to minimize the impacts of the greater situation and the what these families, and certainly what the law enforcement officers went through on that day. Speaking specifically to journalists and any of the other, people who were responding to the incident, maybe they would feel similarly. It is traumatic to be in a situation like that. It can be scary. I'm sure some of the homeowners and people who were living there that witnessed what we witnessed would feel a little bit nervous and on edge, because that's not normal, right? For me personally, I did seek counseling. I think I had some kind of an acute type of PTSD. Talking about it now, it does, make me feel a little bit uncomfortable. That of course, I was prepared to talk about it, but I think when you bring it back up, it's like, oh, wow, you're reminding yourself of what it was like. But this is what we do. This is how we serve. And I'm happy that I could have been there to bring that story to people, because people needed that information at that time. And it's a story that we're still telling today.
You did a great job reporting out there. Carlin, you got something?
I do. I remember, I mean, the day was a blur, kind of like you had said, but something I really remember about after it was, I think, the morning meeting after.
Yep.
We are so go, 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 go. You know, we're always on to the next thing. And Kayland, who's always so calm, collected, and very poised, kind of took a moment in the meeting to just be like, hey, let's talk about this. Like, and I really appreciated that you did that, because again, we're so
No.
like after this,
Like,
and
what's next?
and you kind of thankfully slowed things down, and we talked about mental health. We've had an expert on here talk about mental health when it comes to our jobs or anything. We acknowledge we're not on the front lines, but what you did was great for our newsroom, and we needed that. So I thank you for doing that.
Well, thank you. You know, I think that people think about journalists and they think we're just these super tough people and
Right.
go out to all of these different scenes. And one of the most common questions I get, whether it's a school talk or if I'm meeting people in the community, is, you know, how do you go to scenes where, you know, someone has passed away and you're right there reporting on it as it's happening, or there's something, you know, a house fire or something terrible that's happening. And we do feel that. We feel the emotions of that. And sometimes we have to just press pause and check in on ourselves. And I think that, you know, with the desire of wanting to do good and wanting to tell people information about what's happening, which is so critical to our job, sometimes we have to just press pause and say, hey, is everybody okay? We did a really big thing yesterday, and a big thing in the way of we really pushed ourselves. Let's just check in and take a pause for a moment. And I'm glad that our team kind of took that little pause, and we were all very motivated to get back out there and serve the public
We were
in
better
the way
for
that we
it.
do.
So thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, and for the longest, I felt like I was a champion in my career. Like, you know, I'm desensitized. That was my answer. I'm desensitized to all this stuff. It doesn't bother me. And I think like maybe a couple of years ago, I had to take like inventory of my own mental health. I'm like, no, like I don't feel okay.
It wears on you.
Yeah, it wears on you, and it's like it's okay to not be the brave, the tough journalist that we are supposed to be. Like, I feel sad today. I don't like I don't
and you
like
can, and that's okay. Yeah.
So that I remember that moment. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was because
It
I
was a
think
moment we all needed.
yeah, and I think everybody was kind of like, okay, all right, let's talk about what we're dealing with right now. Wow, yeah, Kayland, thank you. Carly, you got anything else?
That's all I got.
Kayland, thank you for stopping by Live Impact Studios. We're gonna have to have you come back on, talk to us again. But again, you do important work in our newsroom. You do an incredible job. You're an incredible journalist. And again, thank you for taking. I know this is tough to reflect back on such a tragic day for our city, but thank you.
Well, thank you for allowing me a little time, and have a great show.
Always welcome back on. All right, so coming up Tuesday, tomorrow, again, the 1-year anniversary of this tragedy, we will have a special 5:30 show, taking a look at that day, what has changed, questions we still have, and honoring those officers. Again, today we are doing streaming coverage on WCNC Plus, that special streaming coverage. So make sure you download WCNC Plus on your TV and watch for free. And again, I want to remind you that special on Tuesday right here on WCNC Plus and on WCNC Charlotte, 5:30, a special 5:30 show.